Some mistakes cost money, but the worst ones cost a lifetime of regret. The morning traffic flowed smoothly through downtown Atlanta as sunlight reflected across rows of polished glass buildings and expensive luxury cars waiting patiently at a busy intersection. Among them sat a flawless red Ferrari worth more than $200,000, its engine humming quietly while pedestrians admired it from the sidewalk. Behind the wheel was Marcus Bennett, a well-dressed black man in his late 30s wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a simple silver watch. He looked nothing like someone searching for attention. His eyes remained focused on the changing traffic light while soft jazz played through the speakers. To everyone around him, he was simply another successful professional heading toward an important meeting. No one noticed the encrypted phone resting silently beside him. No one recognized the government credentials carefully tucked inside his leather wallet. And no one had any reason to believe that within minutes the calm morning would become the center of attention across the entire block. A police cruiser rolled into the intersection with sudden confidence before stopping directly in front of the Ferrari. Officer Ryan Cooper stepped out wearing a perfectly pressed uniform, polished boots, and the unmistakable expression of a man who believed his badge answered every question before anyone else had the chance to speak. Several people paused on the sidewalk, curious about the unexpected traffic stop. Marcus lowered his window without hesitation and greeted the officer politely. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Ryan barely acknowledged the greeting. Instead, his eyes moved slowly across the Ferrari, lingering on its bright paint, custom wheels, and personalized license plate. His expression shifted from curiosity to quiet suspicion. "Step out of the vehicle," he said firmly. Marcus complied immediately, calmly opening the door and standing beside the Ferrari with both hands visible. There was no argument. No raised voice. No frustration. He simply waited, giving the officer every opportunity to explain the situation. Ryan circled the Ferrari once before speaking again. "This is a very expensive car." Marcus nodded politely. "Yes, it is. Mind telling me how you afford something like this?" Ryan asked. Marcus answered with the same calm professionalism. "I earn my living through federal public service." Ryan smirked as though he had already decided the answer could not possibly be true. Around them, more pedestrians slowed their pace. Several drivers rolled down their windows. Someone quietly lifted a phone to record what appeared to be another routine traffic stop. Marcus noticed the cameras but never changed his expression. Experience had taught him that patience often revealed far more than confrontation ever could. Ryan continued inspecting the vehicle, convinced something about the situation did not add up. His confidence grew with every passing second while Marcus remained remarkably composed. Then, in a single careless moment driven by haste rather than verification, Ryan made a decision involving the Ferrari that immediately resulted in visible damage to the luxury vehicle. The sharp sound echoed across the intersection, drawing gasps from nearby witnesses. Conversation stopped. Phones rose higher into the air. Marcus looked briefly toward the damaged section of the Ferrari before turning back to the officer. His face showed disappointment but not anger. He took one slow breath and quietly said, "Officer, there is still time to verify the facts before this becomes a much bigger mistake." Ryan dismissed the warning with complete confidence, never realizing that the man standing calmly beside the damaged Ferrari was not simply protecting an expensive car. He was protecting the truth, and the truth was only minutes away from arriving. Marcus Bennett never looked at the growing crowd. He looked only at Officer Ryan Cooper, studying the man with the same quiet attention he reserved for difficult conversations that could change lives. Around them, the busy Atlanta intersection had transformed into an unexpected gathering place. Office workers slowed their morning commute. Delivery drivers remained inside their trucks with windows lowered. A barista from the coffee shop across the street stepped outside after hearing the sharp sound that had interrupted the ordinary rhythm of downtown traffic. Nearly everyone held the same expression. Curiosity first. Concern second. Ryan seemed almost energized by the attention. The more people watched, the more convinced he became that he needed to demonstrate complete control of the situation. He walked another slow circle around the Ferrari, stopping near the damaged section before folding his arms across his chest. "Luxury cars attract attention," he remarked. "Sometimes for the wrong reasons." Marcus answered with steady composure. "Attention does not determine ownership, officer." Ryan gave a short laugh. "Maybe not. But appearances can tell you a lot." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Sometimes appearances tell you very little." Their conversation remained calm, yet every sentence carried increasing weight. A young college student quietly whispered to her friend, "He has not argued once." Her friend nodded. "That officer keeps expecting him to lose his temper." Marcus had learned years earlier that patience often uncovered more truth than confrontation ever could. Every unnecessary assumption became information. Every careless question revealed something about the person asking it. He reached slowly into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. Ryan immediately raised one hand. "Stop right there." Marcus paused exactly where he was. "I was reaching for my wallet because I believed you might want identification." Ryan hesitated for only a second before replying, "Leave it where it is for now." Marcus calmly lowered his hand again. "As you wish." The exchange lasted only moments, but several witnesses exchanged puzzled looks. It was becoming increasingly obvious that Marcus had cooperated with every instruction he had received. Across the street, a black sport utility vehicle turned onto the avenue before stopping at a traffic light nearly half a block away. Its windows were darkly tinted, making it impossible to see the occupants. Marcus noticed the vehicle for only an instant before returning his attention to Ryan. His expression never changed. Inside his jacket pocket, his encrypted government phone vibrated once, then again several seconds later. He made no attempt to answer it. Ryan noticed the vibration. "Expecting an important call?" Marcus answered honestly. "Possibly. It can wait." "Yes," Marcus replied. "It can." The calmness in his voice unsettled Ryan far more than an argument would have. He expected frustration, excuses, perhaps even complaints about the damaged Ferrari. Instead, Marcus remained focused on cooperation. The silence between them grew heavier with every passing second. Then a brief transmission crackled across Ryan's shoulder radio. The dispatcher spoke too quietly for the crowd to understand, but one phrase reached Marcus clearly. "Federal priority notification pending." Ryan pressed the button on his radio without looking away from Marcus. "Repeat later," he replied. "I am busy." The transmission ended. Marcus took one slow breath before speaking again. "Officer Cooper, I respectfully recommend verifying every available fact before making another decision." Ryan shook his head with complete confidence. "I already know everything I need to know." Marcus glanced briefly toward the black sport utility vehicle that had quietly stopped closer to the intersection. "No, officer," he said softly. "I do not believe you do." Officer Ryan Cooper slipped the radio back onto his shoulder without giving the interrupted transmission another thought. In his mind, the situation standing directly in front of him mattered more than any message coming through dispatch. He glanced once more at the bright red Ferrari, then back at Marcus Bennett, whose calm demeanor had become increasingly difficult to explain. Most drivers became anxious after an expensive vehicle was damaged. Some demanded supervisors. Others argued loudly enough to attract even larger crowds. Marcus had done none of those things. He simply stood beside the Ferrari with remarkable composure, almost as if the damaged vehicle had become less important than the decision still being made around it. That quiet confidence only strengthened Ryan's suspicion. "You are surprisingly calm," Ryan observed. Marcus answered with a slight nod. "Staying calm usually leads to better decisions." Ryan folded his arms again. "Or maybe you already know something I do not." Marcus met his eyes. "That is possible." The straightforward answer caught Ryan off guard, but instead of slowing down, he interpreted it as arrogance. Around them, the crowd continued growing. A local news photographer passing through downtown paused across the street after noticing dozens of people gathering around the traffic stop. A ride-share driver lowered his window and quietly asked a pedestrian what had happened. "The officer damaged that Ferrari," someone replied. "The driver has barely said anything." More phones appeared above the crowd, recording every word. Marcus noticed them but remained focused entirely on Ryan. His encrypted phone vibrated once again inside his jacket. This time the display briefly illuminated through the fabric before fading. Ryan caught the faint glow. "You still are not answering that call," he remarked. Marcus smiled politely. "The people trying to reach me know I will respond when the situation allows." Ryan shook his head. "Must be nice having that kind of confidence." Marcus answered calmly. Confidence and preparation are not the same thing. Before Ryan could respond, another police cruiser arrived and parked several yards behind the first. Officer Lisa Monroe stepped out carrying a digital incident tablet. She approached slowly, immediately noticing the damaged Ferrari and the unusually large crowd. "Ryan," she said quietly, "dispatch has been trying to reach you several times." Ryan dismissed the comment with a wave of his hand. "I will deal with dispatch after I finish here." Lisa glanced briefly toward Marcus, then toward the black sport utility vehicle that had now stopped less than 100 feet away. Its engine remained running, but no one stepped outside. Something about the vehicle caught her attention. Government license plates. No visible agency markings. She frowned slightly but said nothing. Marcus followed her line of sight for only a moment before returning his attention to Ryan. His voice remained steady. "Officer Cooper, I would like to provide identification whenever you are ready." Ryan replied almost immediately. "I have not decided that I need it yet." Lisa looked at Ryan with visible surprise. "You have not verified identification?" she asked quietly. Ryan answered without lowering his voice. "I know enough already." Marcus inhaled slowly before speaking one final time. "Respectfully, officer, assumptions have a way of becoming very expensive." Almost on cue, the black sport utility vehicle's doors opened. 3 professionally dressed individuals stepped onto the sidewalk with measured confidence. They did not hurry. They did not call out. They simply walked toward the intersection with the unmistakable composure of people who already knew exactly where they belonged, while the morning air grew noticeably quieter with every step they took. The 3 strangers crossed the street without hesitation, their pace steady, their attention focused entirely on the intersection. They wore dark tailored suits that blended easily into the business district, yet something about the way they moved immediately caught the attention of people who had worked around law enforcement. They did not look curious. They looked prepared. Officer Lisa Monroe noticed them first. Her eyes briefly settled on the small communication earpieces tucked discreetly behind one man's ear before shifting toward the government license plates on the parked sport utility vehicle. She quietly stepped closer to Ryan Cooper. "Ryan," she said in a lower voice, "I think we should slow this down and verify who everyone is." Ryan barely looked at her. "There is nothing to verify," he replied confidently. "I already know what I am dealing with." Marcus Bennett remained exactly where he had been standing since the traffic stop began. The morning breeze moved gently through the downtown streets while sunlight reflected across the damaged Ferrari. He glanced once toward the approaching group before returning his attention to Ryan. His expression remained remarkably calm, almost compassionate. "Officer Cooper," Marcus said quietly, "every situation deserves a complete set of facts before conclusions are reached." Ryan smiled as though he had heard enough advice for one morning. "You keep saying that." Marcus nodded. "Because it remains true." Around them, the crowd continued growing larger. Several office employees stood outside nearby buildings pretending to check their phones while quietly observing the unusual scene. A local television photographer adjusted his camera lens from across the intersection. Drivers waiting at the traffic light remained inside their vehicles instead of continuing through the green signal, hoping to understand why such a routine stop had become the center of attention. Even the city seemed to pause. The three suited individuals stopped several feet away without speaking. None of them interrupted the conversation. None displayed badges or credentials. They simply observed with the relaxed confidence of professionals who understood exactly how much information silence could reveal. Ryan noticed them at last. "Can I help you?" he asked firmly. The tallest of the three offered a polite smile. "Not yet, officer." The simple answer seemed to unsettle Ryan far more than confrontation would have. Lisa Monroe quietly looked from Marcus to the newcomers, then back toward Ryan. Something no longer felt ordinary. Her training reminded her that experienced federal personnel often arrived quietly, allowing local officers every opportunity to complete routine verification before stepping into a situation. Marcus's encrypted phone vibrated once again. This time the display briefly illuminated with a single name before the screen dimmed. Rebecca Lawson. Marcus did not reach for it. He simply let the call continue unanswered. Ryan noticed the glow again. "You really trust whoever keeps calling you?" Marcus answered with complete honesty. "They trust me to remain patient." Another transmission suddenly sounded through Lisa's shoulder radio. "Unit 12, Federal Liaison has arrived at your location. Maintain the scene and await coordination." Lisa looked immediately toward Ryan. He had heard the message too. For the first time that morning, uncertainty flickered across his face before pride quickly covered it again. "Probably unrelated," he muttered. Marcus slowly exhaled and looked directly into Ryan's eyes. "Officer Cooper," he said with genuine sincerity, "there is still an opportunity to let professionalism guide what happens next." Ryan remained silent. Behind Marcus, one of the suited individuals finally reached inside his jacket, not hurriedly, but with calm precision, removing a leather credential wallet that remained closed in his hand as the entire intersection watched the next few seconds unfold in complete silence. The leather credential wallet remained closed in the stranger's hand, and yet no one in the intersection seemed willing to breathe until it was opened. Officer Ryan Cooper watched carefully, still convinced that whatever was about to happen could not possibly change the conclusion he had already reached. Marcus Bennett remained motionless beside the Ferrari, his attention fixed not on the approaching officials but on Ryan himself. There was no satisfaction in his expression. Only quiet patience. The tallest man stopped a respectful distance away before speaking in an even, professional voice. "Good morning, officer. I am going to ask a simple question before we move any further. Has identification been requested and verified?" Ryan answered immediately. "It has not been necessary." The stranger nodded slowly without showing approval or disagreement. "Understood." Lisa Monroe lowered her eyes for a brief moment. She already knew that answer would matter. Around them, the growing crowd had become remarkably silent. Even the local news photographer lowered his camera slightly, sensing that something far more significant than damaged property was unfolding. The morning traffic continued flowing through nearby intersections, but this corner of downtown Atlanta felt completely removed from the rest of the city. Marcus finally reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket after Ryan gave a short nod of permission. His movements were calm, deliberate, and completely unhurried. He removed a slim black leather wallet and held it closed in one hand before looking toward the approaching official instead of Ryan. The official smiled politely. "Thank you, Agent Bennett." Ryan's head turned sharply toward Marcus. "Agent," he repeated before anyone answered. Marcus opened the credential wallet just enough for the federal identification to become visible. He did not raise it dramatically. He did not announce his position. He simply presented it with the same professionalism he had shown since the traffic stop began. The official then removed his own credentials and displayed them as well. "Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson requested that we meet Special Agent Marcus Bennett here this morning regarding an active federal assignment." Ryan stared at the credentials without speaking. Lisa Monroe quietly stepped closer and read the identification from where she stood. The realization reached her immediately. Marcus had told the truth from the very beginning. Every answer, every request, every recommendation to verify the facts. Another black sport utility vehicle rolled smoothly to the curb behind the first one. This time, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson stepped out herself, carrying a secure document case beneath one arm. She crossed the sidewalk with measured confidence before extending her hand toward Marcus. "Good morning, Marcus. Sorry we are a few minutes behind schedule." Marcus returned the handshake with a small smile. "Not a problem. I believed you would arrive when you were supposed to." Rebecca glanced briefly toward the damaged Ferrari before looking at Ryan and Lisa. Her expression remained completely professional. "I understand there has been an unexpected incident this morning." No accusation appeared in her voice. No anger. Only a commitment to understanding exactly what had happened. Ryan finally found his voice. "He never told me he was with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Marcus answered gently before anyone else could speak. "Officer Cooper, I attempted several times to provide identification. I also encouraged verification before assumptions. I believed that was the most respectful way to handle the situation." The word settled over the intersection with unmistakable weight. For everyone watching, the damaged Ferrari was no longer the center of attention. The real story had quietly become something far more valuable than an expensive automobile. It had become a lesson about the difference between assuming who someone is and taking the time to discover the truth. Officer Ryan Cooper felt the weight of the intersection settle onto his shoulders in a way no uniform had ever prepared him for. The confidence that had guided every decision since the beginning of the traffic stop quietly gave way to a realization he could no longer ignore. Every recommendation Marcus Bennett had offered had been reasonable. Every request had been professional. Every opportunity to verify the facts had been placed directly in front of him. Yet he had chosen assumptions instead. Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson accepted the federal credentials back from Marcus before looking toward the damaged Ferrari with measured attention. She did not focus on the cost of the vehicle. She focused on the sequence of events. "We will establish a complete timeline," she said calmly. "That is the standard for every review." Her words carried neither accusation nor emotion. They reflected procedure, and procedure had a way of removing opinion from the conversation. Lisa Monroe quietly activated her digital incident tablet and began recording the facts exactly as they had occurred. Witness names were collected. The location was documented. Traffic cameras covering the intersection were identified. Several bystanders voluntarily offered the videos they had recorded. One businessman stepped forward and explained that he had watched the entire interaction from the sidewalk outside his office building. Another woman who had been waiting at the crosswalk confirmed that Marcus had followed every instruction without raising his voice or refusing cooperation. Rebecca thanked each witness with the same professional courtesy. Captain David Morales arrived only minutes later after receiving notification from dispatch. He stepped out of his department vehicle, greeted the federal agents respectfully, and walked toward Ryan. There was no public lecture. No dramatic confrontation. The captain simply asked one question. "Officer Cooper, has every available fact now been verified?" Ryan looked briefly toward Marcus before answering quietly. "Yes, Captain." "It has." Captain Morales nodded once. "Very well. We will complete the appropriate administrative review according to department policy." Ryan accepted the response without argument. For the first time that morning, he understood that accountability was not something to fear. It was something every professional accepted when responsibility came with authority. Marcus remained beside the Ferrari while a specialized towing company arrived to transport the vehicle for inspection and repair assessment. He watched the process silently, showing no interest in assigning blame or drawing additional attention to himself. Rebecca noticed his expression. "You are handling this better than most people would." Marcus offered a small smile. "The vehicle can be repaired. Trust is much harder to restore." Those words lingered in the quiet morning air. Even several members of the crowd lowered their phones after hearing them. The story unfolding before them had become something very different from the one they expected to witness. It was no longer about an expensive sports car or an unexpected federal investigation. It had become a reminder that patience often speaks more clearly than anger and that professionalism is measured most accurately during difficult moments. As traffic slowly returned to normal and pedestrians resumed their routines, the intersection felt strangely peaceful again. The damaged Ferrari was carefully secured for transport, the reports continued to be completed with precision, and every person involved understood that the next chapter would be written not by assumptions, but by verified facts. Marcus looked once more at Ryan before quietly saying, "There is always another chance to begin with respect. It simply has to come before judgment." By early afternoon, the downtown intersection had returned to its usual rhythm, yet the consequences of the morning continued moving quietly through official channels. Inside a nearby field office conference room, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson reviewed the incident reports alongside Captain David Morales. Every witness statement matched. Every traffic camera confirmed the same sequence. The videos recorded by bystanders supported the written reports with remarkable consistency. No detail had been exaggerated. No important fact had been omitted. The evidence spoke clearly without anyone needing to raise a voice. Marcus Bennett sat quietly at the end of the conference table, answering each procedural question with calm precision. He never criticized Officer Ryan Cooper. He never speculated about motives. He simply described what had happened exactly as it occurred. Rebecca noticed that consistency and quietly smiled. "Your report matches every independent statement we have received," she observed. Marcus nodded. The truth is easier to remember because it does not change. Captain Morales closed one of the completed files before looking toward Ryan, who had remained silent throughout the review. The confidence that had defined him earlier that morning had disappeared, replaced by thoughtful reflection. For the first time since joining the department, he seemed to understand how quickly assumptions could shape decisions before facts had the opportunity to speak. Captain Morales addressed him respectfully. "Officer Cooper, the department will complete its administrative evaluation according to established policy. Until that review is finished, your field responsibilities will be temporarily reassigned." Ryan accepted the decision without hesitation. "I understand, Captain." There was no argument. No excuse. Only acceptance. Rebecca gathered the final documents before standing. "Professional accountability exists to protect public trust," she said. "When people see that standards apply equally to everyone, confidence in the system grows stronger." Marcus quietly agreed. That is why verification always comes before conclusions. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into the secure vehicle inspection facility where the Ferrari had been transported. Certified technicians carefully documented the visible damage before preparing an official repair estimate. One technician looked up from his clipboard and asked, "Would you like us to begin repairs immediately?" Marcus smiled politely. "Please follow the normal process. There is no need for special treatment." The technician nodded with visible respect. Outside the facility, several reporters waited, hoping Marcus would make a public statement. Rebecca approached him before he reached the entrance. "You could easily become the headline on every evening broadcast." Marcus looked toward the cameras, then quietly shook his head. "The lesson matters more than my name." Instead of speaking to reporters, he entered his vehicle provided by the Bureau and departed without seeking attention. Across town, Officer Ryan Cooper sat alone in the department briefing room reviewing the incident timeline once more. Each page reminded him that Marcus had offered cooperation at every stage. Every request to verify identification had been reasonable. Every opportunity to slow down had been ignored. The realization was uncomfortable, yet necessary. He finally understood that authority without humility could lead even experienced professionals toward costly mistakes. As the afternoon sunlight faded across the Atlanta skyline, two separate journeys quietly continued. One belonged to a federal agent who never needed to announce his position because his character had spoken long before his credentials did. The other belonged to a police officer beginning the difficult work of rebuilding judgment through reflection rather than assumption. Neither journey ended that day, but both had been permanently changed by one ordinary traffic stop that became an extraordinary reminder that respect should always arrive before conclusions. Several days later, the official review reached its conclusion, not with dramatic announcements or crowded press conferences, but through the careful procedures that define professional accountability. Inside the Atlanta Police Department headquarters, Captain David Morales met privately with Officer Ryan Cooper to discuss the completed findings. Every body camera recording, every witness statement, every traffic camera angle, and every written report had been reviewed independently. The conclusion remained consistent across every source. Verification opportunities had been available from the very beginning, yet assumptions had repeatedly replaced careful judgment. Captain Morales placed the completed administrative report on the conference table before speaking. "Our responsibility is not simply enforcing the law," he said calmly. "Our responsibility is earning public trust every single day." Ryan looked down at the report without interrupting. He understood that nothing written inside those pages could be changed. More importantly, he understood why it should not be changed. The review recommended additional professional training, temporary reassignment from field patrol responsibilities, and a formal evaluation of decision-making procedures. Ryan accepted every recommendation without objection. "I made decisions before confirming the facts," he admitted quietly. "That should not have happened." Captain Morales nodded once. Acknowledging a mistake is where improvement begins. Across town, Marcus Bennett returned to the federal field office after completing another assignment unrelated to the traffic stop. The repaired Ferrari had already been returned to him in excellent condition, but he spent little time discussing the vehicle. Instead, he focused on the investigation that had originally brought him downtown that morning. During a staff meeting, one younger federal agent asked him whether he had ever considered responding differently during the encounter. Marcus smiled thoughtfully before answering. "People often believe patience means weakness. In reality, patience allows the truth enough time to arrive." The room remained silent for several moments as everyone considered the simplicity of that statement. Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson later shared the completed interagency review with local department leadership as part of a cooperative training initiative. Rather than presenting the incident as an embarrassing failure, both agencies agreed to use it as an educational example demonstrating the importance of communication, verification, professionalism, and mutual respect. The goal was not to criticize individuals. The goal was to strengthen future decisions before similar situations ever occurred again. Weeks passed, and life gradually returned to normal. Downtown Atlanta continued moving with its familiar energy. The intersection where everything had happened looked exactly the same as it always had. Thousands of vehicles crossed it every day without interruption. Most people passing through had no idea that one ordinary morning at that corner had quietly changed the perspective of everyone directly involved. One afternoon, Ryan happened to see Marcus again while attending a community outreach event organized jointly by local law enforcement and federal agencies. Their eyes met across the room. Ryan walked over without hesitation and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Marcus looked at him with the same calm expression he had carried since the beginning of their first meeting. "For what?" Ryan answered honestly. "For giving me opportunities to verify the facts instead of making the situation worse." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Every professional deserves the chance to learn. What matters is what comes after the lesson." As they stepped back into the crowd, there was no applause, no dramatic celebration, and no public recognition. There was only a quiet understanding that real justice is not measured by who wins an argument. It is measured by whether people leave a difficult moment wiser, fairer, and more committed to treating every person with equal dignity before making assumptions. Months later, the story of that ordinary morning in downtown Atlanta had quietly become part of several professional training sessions shared between local law enforcement and federal agencies. It was never presented as a sensational headline or an embarrassing spectacle. Instead, instructors described it as a reminder that every badge, every title, and every position of authority carries the same responsibility to verify facts before reaching conclusions. Marcus Bennett never attended those presentations. he preferred remaining focused on the work that mattered rather than the recognition that sometimes followed it. On another clear morning, he drove the restored Ferrari through the same intersection where everything had begun. The repairs had returned the car to perfect condition, leaving no visible sign of what had happened weeks earlier. Yet Marcus understood that the most valuable thing restored had never been the vehicle itself. It was the confidence. That honest professionalism could still guide difficult situations toward meaningful change. As he waited at a familiar traffic light, he noticed a young father standing nearby with his son. The little boy pointed excitedly toward the bright red Ferrari before looking at his father with wide eyes. "Do you think the driver is famous?" he asked. His father smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe he is simply someone who worked hard and treats people well." Marcus heard the conversation through his open window and quietly smiled to himself. Sometimes the smallest moments carried the greatest meaning. Later that afternoon, Officer Ryan Cooper completed another day of professional development training before leaving the academy classroom. The lessons had been challenging, but they had also been honest. Instead of resisting them, he had chosen to listen. Before walking to his car, he stopped beside a group of new recruits preparing for their first week of field assignments. One of them asked what advice he would give before they began wearing the uniform. Ryan thought carefully before answering. "Never decide who someone is before you know the facts. Respect every person first. Verification always comes before judgment." The recruits nodded, unaware that those words had been earned through personal experience rather than found in a training manual. Across the city, Supervisory Special Agent Rebecca Lawson closed the final administrative file connected to the incident and placed it into secure archives. The case had reached its official conclusion. Every recommendation had been completed. Every agency had fulfilled its responsibilities. She looked toward Marcus and said with quiet satisfaction, "Sometimes the best outcome is not proving who was right. It is helping everyone become better afterward." Marcus agreed. Justice lasts longer when it teaches instead of humiliating. As evening settled over the Atlanta skyline, traffic continued moving beneath the city lights exactly as it had before that unforgettable morning. Thousands of strangers crossed paths without knowing one another's stories, occupations, or responsibilities. Some wore uniforms. Some wore business suits. Others wore ordinary clothes. Yet every one of them deserved the same measure of fairness before assumptions could ever take their place. Marcus guided the Ferrari onto the highway as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving the city glowing beneath the first lights of evening. He never looked back at the events that had changed so many lives because he no longer needed to. The lesson had already traveled much farther than any single intersection. It lived in every professional who chose patience over prejudice, facts over assumptions, and respect over appearances. Because in the end, a badge may represent authority, a luxury car may represent success, and a title may represent achievement, but character is the only thing that truly earns trust. And trust, once built on fairness and truth, will always travel farther than fear ever can.